Beyond Your Table, From the Real Dirt to Common Ground. It's a new podcast, and it's a podcast that myself, Rodger Wasson, and Michael Dimock are starting. Michael, explain, how are we going to get from the real dirt to common ground in this podcast?
Well, we're going to sit down with farmers from all over the state of California who are on the cutting edge, who are part of meeting the challenges of our day. That is, environmental challenges, health challenges, climate challenges, social challenges with farm workers. I mean, some incredible things are happening here in the state, and we're going to be bringing people into conversation with farmers who are doing that stuff. Founded in 1919, the Agricultural Council of California is a member-supported organization. They advocate for more than 15,000 farmers across California, and they range from farmer-owned businesses to the world's best-known brands. The Ag Council works tirelessly to keep its members productive and competitive so that agriculture can remain California's number one industry and members can continue to produce the highest quality food for the entire world. In the belief that the diverse visions of agriculture's future can be bridged to ensure a resilient food system that nourishes all people, the Ag Council of California supports this conversation today and all conversations meant to find common ground.
Michael Dimock and I are here, and we're here to kick off what's going to be a new podcast. We each do a podcast, but we're going to do a new one that's called Beyond Your Table, The Real Dirt to Common Ground. And where better to do it than down at the World Ag Expo. We've got some friends around us. We're going to introduce them in just a minute. But I wanted to state, first of all, that to do this enterprise, we really wanted to thank somebody. We've got a couple of organizations that said, let's have more conversations like this, and they're able to help us get this thing going. First of all, I want to thank the Environmental Defense Fund. They're working to build climate resilience on the front lines of America's farms, and with well over half of the earth lands managed by a farmer, rancher, or forester, their ability to thrive on a changing planet will depend on creating incentives, policies, and social norms to build agriculture resilience. And that's why EDF works with trusted partners like the National Corn Growers Association to accelerate the adoption of practices that deliver co-benefits for soil health, water quality, and wildlife. EDF has a unique approach, and we're glad to work with them. They want to link science, policy, and farm economics to deliver maximum benefits to the environment and farmers' bottom lines. So what a nice start, Michael.
Yeah.
And I want to introduce Michael Dimock, who's going to be our co-host. Michael has a podcast. He's known by almost everybody across the country, let alone in California, for a lot of work with Roots of Change and food policies, and he's a real trooper out there getting into all sorts of issues in behalf of the food movement. Michael, I'm glad that we're going to be doing this together, and I think you have an introduction or two to make, too.
I do, Rodger. Thank you. Yeah. And people should know a little bit about you, obviously. You're an Illinois farm boy, went to Illinois State, had a radio career early in your life. That's why you have such a good radio voice. My editor for our programs always saying, God, he has such a great radio voice, Rodger. So, but then you got into agricultural marketing, worked for the lamb folks, the pork guys in the Midwest, and then you came out here and for 10 years ran the Almond Board of California, which is one of the most important commodity boards in the state. And and love your podcast, Farm to Table Talk, one of my favorites. Listen to it all the time. And and I have someone I want to thank, and that is the Agricultural Council of California. Some of you may know it was founded in 1919, and it's a member-supported organization advocating for more than 15,000 farmers across California. And those farmers are either running family-owned businesses, farmer-owned businesses, or some of them are some of the world's largest brands, and you would know them. And Ag Council told us that in their belief that the diverse visions of agriculture's future can be bridged to ensure a resilient food system that nourishes all people, they support this conversation and all conversations meant to find common ground. So we're really grateful to the Ag Council of California for supporting today's conversation.
I think we should also thank musicians we may hear in the background here.
Yeah,
because
there's a
if
lot
anybody
of noise
doubted
going
that
on.
we're live on the ground at
Yeah.
the World Ag Expo, where the 100,000 people come to the World Agriculture Expo, and we've got our own little corner, and we're being serenaded. We've got the bands in the background, so
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be
might hear-
engines, because this is the largest agricultural expo in the world, and people came from all over.
they literally all over the world. We got a ride over here this morning. They were saying that there's a whole busload coming from Romania,
Right.
and they're coming here to start figuring out how they can build an extension service
Right.
like we have in the United States. So that's pretty exciting.
So I have a couple of other introductions I want to do.
Yeah.
So we have with us kind of at the center of the conversation, but we have a lot of friends and guests here who are going to also join us. But to start, we're gonna focus on two folks. Don Cameron, who is the current president of the State Board of Food and Agriculture, the former chair of the Environmental Farming Act's Science Advisory Panel, which is a very important panel driving, guiding, leading some of the most innovative environmental farming programs in the world, I think. We'll hear more about that. Don is a graduate of the California State University Fresno program in biology. Did not grow up on a farm, which you share with Judith, we're going to hear about, but has been farming for nearly 40 years. And a really diverse set of crops, and amazing. We heard last night about the diverse set of crops. We'll hear more about that. And very innovative, growing organic crops, but also growing GMO crops. I mean, biologically, biotech crops, and an amazing array of crops through the Terra Nova Farming Company, which you run. And I think we're going to hear a lot about the soil work and water work that you're doing. And we'll hear more about his farm through his talk. And then we're also joined by Judith Redmond. And Judith is one of the founders of one of the most famous kind of pioneering organic farms in California, Full Belly Farm. She and partners started way back, I think, in 1989 we talked about. It's now 400 acres, has grown over the years, very diverse. And she is also a member of the Science Advisory Board of CDFA and is integral to helping farmers do new and innovative things to particularly build soil, but also conserve water. And actually, Full Belly was 1985, not 1989, so it's even older. They have tons of interns on that property. As I said, they have a lot of diverse crops. They have a CSA. They serve restaurants and grocery stores, and also work farmers markets. And our winners of the Leopold Conservation Award back in 2014. I remember when that happened. That was a big thing. So, and Judith did not grow up on a farm like Don, but she went to UC Davis, got a master's degree in plant pathology, did some interesting research, and ended up finding some partners and started Full Belly. So glad to have you here today.
Well, I can't wait to talk to these two because, when we've got farmers across this whole state, and it's a very diverse group of farmers that we have in the state of California, we purposely have kind of two different representations here in a way, because Judith has a different kind of operation than Don has. Don also has organic as well, and Don is larger scale. I think it's safe to call it that. Don, you represent lots of people, and as Michael was saying, you've got over, 25 some commodities too. But tell us a little bit more about your farming operation.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here today. So Terra Nova, when I first began in Terra Nova, we essentially grew three crops. It was cotton, alfalfa, and grain. And over the years, we've made some intentional changes. In 1993, we began farming organic crops, and we started to get away from more of the regular commodity crops, growing more specialty crops, wine grapes. We've ventured into almonds, walnuts, pistachios, but we've really come full circle when we're doing some of the real minor crops. We'll do seed crops 400 acres of lettuce seed, both organic and conventional, processing tomatoes, fresh onions, carrots, peppers, and just a wide variety of different crops on the farm.
And Judith, how about you? Would you explain what goes on at Full Belly Farms?
Yeah, thank you. I moved to Full Belly Farm in 1989 and joined two of my current partners who were renting there at that time. We were farming organically from the very start, even though at that moment in time, the organic market was almost non-existent. It was nothing like it is today. From that moment in 1989, we've evolved and changed quite a bit. And during that time, I thought it might be interesting to note that there have been no outside investors. We didn't have big money that we brought into it. We basically evolved the farm over time with our own work. That's what happened. At the current, now there are 6 owners. We all live on the farm. And I think the fact that we live on the farm really helps to give us a lot of connection, not just to the farm, having lived there for over 30 years, and the soil, but also the community that lives around us. We're 400 acres now. We grow vegetables, fruits, nuts, flowers, quite diverse, many varieties of all of those things. And as if to make it even more complicated, we also have hens that lay eggs, probably 1,000 egg layers, and we have a herd of sheep, and those animals are part of our rotation, so they're involved in the vegetable production, which is a little bit of an outlier in California agriculture today. Our top crops, our 4 top crops, number 1, tomatoes. We grow heirlooms and cherries and all kinds of other tomatoes. Number 2 is melons and watermelons. Number 3 is flowers. We grow a lot of flowers, so we're feeding not only people's health with vegetables and fruits, but their mental health as well with flowers. And number 4 is potatoes. And we not only grow those crops, we harvest them, we pack them, we sell them, and we distribute them. So we're going the whole way, and that marketing effort is quite a big part of our farm. To market all of those crops takes quite an effort because we're selling to 3 farmers markets a week. We have a 1,000-member CSA program, and we sell to stores and wholesale accounts, as Michael mentioned. I think my description of the farm would not be complete, however, without mentioning one more really important element of the farm, which is that we have a really well-developed outreach and education component. We work a lot with the public. We have, in the spring and the fall, we have classes. Kids that come to the farm, they spend the night there, overnight there, with their teachers and a couple parents, and they learn a lot about agriculture. In the summertime, we have 6 sessions of camp for different aged kids that spend a whole week at the farm. We also have a big harvest festival in the fall. We have classes that we give. We have events on the farm, a monthly farm dinner and a monthly pizza night. And finally, we also have apprentices. We have farmer apprentices, 5 per year, that spend a year, or 5 at any moment, who spend a year at the farm learning about agriculture and hopefully going on to spend their lives in some sort of food and agriculture career.
That's a huge enterprise. Could you explain a little bit more? How many people are involved? If you looked at the principals, the partners, the owners, the workers, the interns, how many people are totally involved in the organization?
As Don, I'm sure, would be the first to tell you, California agriculture is very, very labor intensive. Growing fruits, vegetables, nuts, flowers, those things all take many, many hands, especially on an organic farm, I believe. We are always short of labor these last few years, so we would tell you we need more hands. There are 6 owners on the farm. We all live there permanently with our families. And then in terms of, there's usually 5 apprentice interns. And during the slower season, which is maybe 6 months of the year, there's about 60 employees. So every day on our home farm, 60 people drive up the driveway, and we have to send them off to do the right thing during the day. And in the busiest part of the year, which is this high summer, those 6 months where we're just running like crazy, there's probably another 40 or 50 more seasonal people for those 6 months where the most busy. So there's a lot of labor that comes to the farm every single day, and we feel like there's this little intense cloud of activity taking place at Full Belly Farm every single day, 6 days a week, all year round.
So it's interesting. Don, can you just talk a little bit about your labor force and how that works, just to see if there's a contrast there?
Sure. We farm definitely on a larger scale. We probably we're around 9,000 acres, with about 900 acres in organic production. We have a core group of about 70 employees year round, and with all the different crops, we are busy year round. We have work for everyone year round. But during the summertime, when we get into some of the vegetable crops that require hand harvest, we may bring in an additional 150 to 200 people just to get through some of the hand harvests that we have, and for weeding, and then for throughout the fall and winter, we have pruning of the trees, pruning of the vines. So we have crews in addition to our main core group throughout the year. So labor has turned into a really critical issue for us, so much to the point that when we look at the crops we're going to be growing, we know we have a risk, because if we can't find enough labor to harvest these crops, they're not going to get picked.
Yeah.
So there's a real risk out there.
I know where I live. Apples were left on the trees this year in West Sonoma County. They couldn't get labor.
Yeah, no, labor is becoming more critical year by year. The age of the workforce is getting older, and the children of the workers that we have now are going into other areas. They're not going into agriculture. We'd love to see them come back at a different level, at a more technological job, something that challenges them. But it's hard to bring people into agriculture.
Yeah. Well, I heard a story, Judith, on our way down here. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear about the struggle you've had, just with the story about your mechanic. That would be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, we at our farm, we really think that there needs to be some immigration reform, talking about solutions as well as the problems, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that. It was quite a shock when I picked up the phone one day, and our longtime mechanic, and we need a mechanic because we break things, was calling from the border. He had gone down to visit his family, and at the border he was told he couldn't get across, and he had been with us for years, so he wasn't allowed back in. But it's very difficult. We feel like we have agreement with Mexico and Canada that goods and services and trucks and vegetables can all go back and forth, but labor can't. And that doesn't make sense. In the European Union, labor can move around. It should be the same in the countries that are part of NAFTA. The workers, if they want to come here to work, they should be able to get a visa and be able to work here, because there is work here for them. And we're, being told by our crew leaders that we should really cut down our production by 20% if we want to be able to do a good job at taking care of our crops and harvesting them, because we just cannot get enough people. The other side of that, though, I think, just to mention it, is that there are a lot of young people who want to farm, women who want to farm, minority farmers who want to farm. There are a lot of people out there who want work that is meaningful to them, and working with agriculture and with plants is something that we find an overwhelming number of people come and apply to our farm to be apprentices, more than we can take. So I think we need, as agriculture, to really encourage those new farmers to figure out how to support them and give them a future in agriculture, because that's what they're looking for. And I think as farmers, that's something that we really can do.
Well, this might be a good time to bring in a few people that have joined us here around the table, because I believe that there are opinions about getting people involved in agriculture. And I'm going to go to Mary first. I'll let you introduce yourself. And you're running into people all the time that are trying to figure out, how do I become a farmer?
Thank you, Rodger. Thank you, Michael. Mary Kimball, Executive Director of the Center for Land-Based Learning. And thank you, Judith, and also Dawn for talking about your farms, because it's a real pleasure. We've worked with both of you over the years with our youth education programs as well as our adult education programs and the beginning farmer training. And as you just stated, Rodger and Judith, of course, we have learned that ourselves. We've been running youth programs for high school students since 1993, but about 12 years ago, started realizing there was a huge growth in interest in young people wanting to become farmers. And so we decided that we were well suited for the beginning farmer training work, and we created the California Farm Academy. And actually next week, 22nd of February, we'll be inaugurating our 9th class of California Farm Academy beginning farmer training. But we've also created a registered apprenticeship in farm management, and we have an incubator program for those folks who don't have the access to land but do want to start their own operations. And as Judith said, it is really incredible. We have a wide variety and a wide array of people who want to get into agriculture. And rather than dismissing them and saying, you can never do it, you don't have the land, you don't have the money, you don't have the infrastructure, there's too many barriers. Those of us in agriculture, we need to be doing every single thing we can to be encouraging them, to be helping them, to be supporting them in wherever they are, in wherever they want to farm, in whatever model they want to farm, and if it's urban, if it's peri-urban, if it's rural, if it's in the middle of Nebraska or the middle of Monterey County. Doesn't matter. We need to be really encouraging them, and there's lots of ways to do that. And there's the training piece, but of course there's a lot of other ways to do it as well.
Well, Mary, you got a few people sitting beside you over here too. Why don't you pass the mic over? Anybody that's not, you're not going to be too shy to speak up, are you?
No, not really. I'll be
Oh,
okay.
come on.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Yeah, so
Ibu's your name,
So
right?
when-
Introduce
Yes,
yourself,
yes,
say
sir.
where you're from.
Ibu, from Maryland. I've been there since I was 4 years old. Come from Gambia,
Wow.
from the West African coast, and coming here when I was young was different.
So, you want to be a farmer, or do you want to be
Actually,
involved
yeah.
with farm?
Yes, I kind of do. I have an interest in it. I realized that. Hold on, give me a second. That growing up, that just buying stuff isn't gonna work. Being able to grow your own food, sustain yourself, being able to survive is the next level. Like, if you don't, you're pretty much screwed. So that's what I realized for myself not too long ago too. So that's why I'm interested. I've been at the current family farm for a while now, and yeah.
You're woofing, or are you an intern, or what?
Intern.
Okay,
I'm interning
great.
right now.
You're an intern. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So, are
Fantastic.
one of you a woofer too?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a
Let's-
woofer next. Some people listening to this, Michael, might think that's a little odd to refer to somebody as a woofer.
yeah, so
took,
why don't you
took me
explain?
a while. Explain what a woofer
Dahlia,
is.
right? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dahlia. So what woofing is, it's an organization that connects people who want to learn how to farm organically with organic farmers. So right now it's online, but it's been around for, I think, at least 30 years. And you can go online and find farms that look interesting to you, email them, connect with them, and then go stay for a period of time and learn about what they do and how to farm and different kinds of crops and animals and stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, and there's one more here
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, my name is Midam, also woofing at the Kern family farm for, it's been a month now. I'm going to stay there until about mid-May.
So when you're doing this, are you hopeful as a result of this experience, kind of as Mary alluded to, that you'll get the experience and then you're going to find a spot that you can be farmers going forward?
For me, that's the goal eventually. I'm really all about if I can do it myself, I want to do it myself. And so I try to immerse myself in as much craft, farming, building, whatever I can, so I have those skills myself. So once I find a piece of land that I can build my own establishment, start my own little homestead, maybe allow a community to evolve there and allow craft people to come and learn craft, building skills, and farming as well is my goal.
Well, we got to just pass one more over. We've almost covered the whole area here because you're hosting them all, and you've seen this. You've had several kind of classes of people that have come through, and some of them graduated from working at your place, and they're farming themselves now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting us. I didn't know we were going to be part of the podcast.
No,
Expecting to be the audience, but yeah, I'm Hansel Kern with Kern Family Farm, and we are. Speaking of centers, we are near about a mile away from the exact center of California, the geographic center. Our farm is about a mile away as the crow flies, and that is right off the bluffs of the San Joaquin River in Madera County, out of a little town called North Fork, near the corridor between Fresno and Yosemite National Park. So we're a little bit east, out in the boondocks, as we call it. So we're at 3,400 feet on a piece of land that I've been on for 45 years. And I've actually started farming 20 years ago. I'm a retired stonemason and a builder that I was with my father for many years. And so we've been farming for 20 years, and we started hosting woofers about 11 years ago. And we have hosted 580 or 590 young folks from all over the country in the last 11 years. And I call it our wonderful parade of humanity. And our farm we are on 80 acres of land. A lot of it is brushy hillside. It's not exactly what you would call farmland. So we have carved out 42 terraces on our 80 acres. The farm actually takes up about 13 acres. And that's with some, forested areas between terraces, about 14,000 square feet of hoop houses, a small 2 or 3 acre orchard, a couple of acres of vegetable crops, a very small vineyard, and a dry land hayfield that we grow forage hay for our goat herd. We have about 15, 20 goats and 200 or 300 chickens. So our farm is kind of like a really large homestead, and modeled after me growing up with my father being one of the back to the land homesteaders in the 60s and 70s. So that was my inspiration. I lived this lifestyle. So it is such a joy to have these young folks come around from all over the country and get their first taste of something having to do with working with the soil or animals, and I think it's been a gift to us to have their energy. Our children are part of the farm. My son is the manager now, and my daughter runs we have a little organic grocery store in North Fork, and we've been doing the school garden at the elementary school for 20 years. This is our 20th anniversary. So we spend every Friday there the whole day and host all K through 8th grade and preschool on the school garden, which has grown to about 1.5 acres itself and provides food for the cafeteria. So we're all about the next generation as well. We really want the average age of the farmer to drop from 61 to lower and lower, So we're excited about creating a happy place and having farming be a great experience for their young folks to carry on. And we have had folks that have started their own farms or if not even started a farm, they've supported local farms. They started a restaurant. They've had a whole new way of looking about where our food comes from.
Well, this is a fantastic kind of context for what I would like to get into with Judith and Don. So here's the next generation of agriculture, and they're going to face some challenges. And we've been talking last night over dinner about challenges, and so let's get into that. Let's explore some of the challenges. So Judith, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Don. Like at night, when you wake up in the middle of the night, and what do you think of as the biggest worry that you have running your farm about how you're going to how you're going to exist into this century?
Yeah, we've talked about some of the challenges, but maybe I'll just raise 3 others that would perhaps be good to keep in mind and even talk about. One of them, and they're all rather big subjects. One of them is economic viability. I think young farmers and middle-scale farmers, small-scale farmers, in fact, maybe all farmers are very concerned about the economic viability of agriculture in California moving forward. If we look at the fact that there's been a record number of bankruptcies across the country in 2019, the highest rate since 2011, and a lot of them were dairies. But economic viability is something that we should be concerned about, and that I think most farmers are concerned about. The loss of any family farm, the loss of any farmer business that is taking care of the soil is something that I think society should care about, all of us should care about. So that's one challenge that I do think about we worry about and are concerned about all the time. Another challenge, I believe, is that as farmers, especially in California, we're growing really healthy food. We're growing fruits and vegetables and nuts. And I think we want to see that be the food for the future. But in order to keep producing really good, healthy food, we need a functioning ecosystem. And I think we look out at our environment and we want to be good stewards, but we feel like our ecosystem could fail. We're concerned about what's happening to the ecosystem. Climate change, agricultural chemicals, many things, nitrates in the groundwater. We're concerned, very concerned about whether the ecosystem is going to continue to function. And we think that I think that agriculture looks through a very narrow metric. They say crop yields. That's what's going to feed the future. But that's too narrow. We have to think about environment and how it can function in the future. We're not going to be able to grow food if the environment is collapsing. And then sort of the third thing that we spend at Full Valley Farm a lot of time on is we're advocates. We want to see agriculture-friendly policy. We don't like the budget that comes out of the White House and proposes completely slashing the USDA's budget. Over 10 years, $43 million coming out of the agricultural budget, out of agricultural programs. That's the proposal that just came out. We also see $43 billion over 10 years. Yeah. $43 billion over 10 years. Sorry, I might have said that wrong, but it's the same. We look at we're joined to the hip to nutrition programs, and we see also a huge attempt to cut nutrition programs coming from the feds. Here in California, we miss cooperative extension. We feel like cooperative extension is a hugely important part of the viability and sustainability of family farming and young people farming. We need cooperative extension.
Which is the university's way of bringing research to the farmers. That's what cooperative extension
It's very important. And we feel like that's another challenge. As agriculture, we need to promote and support agricultural research, promote and support cooperative extension. Those are things that are going to be very important for the future of young farmers, minority farmers, and women farmers. So those are some of that's like three big challenges that I think agriculture faces: economic viability, good agricultural-friendly policy, and a functioning environment that we can grow food in.
Great. Don.
Yep. So, we we have a lot in common with Judith. We have a lot of the same principles, the same issues, but we're in an area that, California in 2014 passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, where sustainable groundwater your groundwater has to become sustainable and not drop precipitously as it has in the past by 2040. We have 20 years to correct our problem. So for me, water is really a top issue, and moving water, even surface water, throughout the state is critical. But for us, we use groundwater for our pumping, and we've been working for over 30 years to bring floodwater on farm to do groundwater recharge, to start replenishing the aquifer. And
So describe what that means, floodwater, so people know what you mean by floodwater.
Sure. So we have a river that really only runs every 3.5 years, that runs by our operation where we farm. And the floodwater comes in such large quantities when it's coupled with a large snowpack, and when the dams that do hold the surface water become full, they can't hold it anymore. They send it downstream, and there is flooding and property damage that will occur when that floodwater merges with the other rivers and eventually goes out to the ocean. So we've been, for the last 30 years, been putting together an effort to bring floodwater on farm and essentially flood fields, flood growing crops, growing almonds, walnuts, pistachios, and wine grapes, and actually have been able to put really vast amounts of water back into the ground for use during the dry periods. So
So it just soaks in. So it just
yeah,
that's how
we
you-
have
how you're getting-
we have fairly sandy soils. We flood the fields, and the water naturally will go down, percolates down to the aquifer, just as you would at the beach with the sand, the water going down, disappearing.
Don, can you explain for me though how is this going to work? I will get back on what's waking you up at 3 in the morning.
Right.
But how is this going to work when we start having it? The new rules coming into effect that affect the groundwater. How will it cost a farmer to be able to have us comply?
Well, there's two solutions. One, you either, with the sustainable groundwater management, you're going to idle part of your farm and not farm it, or you're going to be involved in a project similar to this, where you're capturing stormwater, floodwater, and storing it underground rather than behind a dam for future use. Those are really the two options. It's been talked about that by the Public Policy Institute of California, that there may be anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million acres being taken out of production due to sustainable groundwater management.
So
That's acreage. So just so people understand, what you're saying is almost between 500,000 and 1 million acres of agricultural land currently producing crops will be taken out of production because there isn't enough groundwater anymore to sustainably keep those operations running.
That's exactly right.
That's huge. That's
That is
huge.
Well, so what I want to understand though is like we've been hearing about people that hope to be able to farm at some point in time, and maybe say a farming operation that's 1,500 or 2,000 acres. I kind of see how you get to them. What about these folks have been mentioning that they want to get a farm and they might have a really intensive, maybe just 10 acres? I mean, are they going to be facing two of it that they have to take out, or does it even touch that scale of farming?
It will touch everyone. There's really, unless you're maybe an acre, 5 acres or less, they may be exempt depending on the regulatory scheme of each area. It's all local control, and growers are involved, environmental justice groups are involved, community groups are involved. So everybody has a say at the table on how the groundwater is going to be managed locally.
Do you get credit for some of the good things you've done already, though? For example, you've installed buried drip irrigation with all your processing tomatoes and some of the other crops as well. And as I understand, if you look at the amount of water to produce a ton of tomatoes, it's well reduced. Do you get any credit for that as we start looking ahead and seeing these restrictions take place?
What that did for us, we ended up probably using 30% less water to grow those tomatoes, and actually increased our yield by 25%. So essentially, we were able to get more tons with much less water. So that has turned into an advantage for us moving forward, but that's been adopted by the majority of the other growers now. So we're using every drop that we have much more efficiently, and producing really more abundant crops with less input.
See, before we get back to his bad dreams, I want to just mention that when you're talking about this with the drip irrigation, I've just recently learned that because of the drip irrigation too, you're applying the fertilizer through the drip system, and that is having an effect on the production of nitrous oxide.
Right.
And
right.
nitrous oxide is is probably the most potent greenhouse gas, and it's almost gone away because of this fertilization that's taking place through the irrigation systems.
Right. We can apply our fertilizer along with the water exactly to the roots of the plant. We spoon feed the crop throughout the year so that we're not leaching excessive any nitrogen to the groundwater. It's an extremely efficient way to farm. We sample our plants throughout the season for nutrient content so that we just give them enough to grow healthy and not really waste the fertilizer that we are using.
So what are some of the other things that you think about? You care about? Water is really important.
So water is always number one on my list. Labor is actually number two. Just being able to source the labor when we need it to harvest a crop. We've been fortunate, although this last summer we ran short of labor during tomato harvest. You just can't find the labor, period. We have not employed the H-2A program that brings labor from Mexico. It's a very costly program and it's very complicated. Some of the large berry companies will employ that H-2A program, but for us, we haven't had to do it. Maybe we will have to in the future. But labor is really difficult here in California now, and we rely a lot of our workforce is undocumented, and we hope that we have a solution. A real comprehensive immigration reform is really what we need here in California.
So that's two. Is there one more, or is that it?
Well, always the regulatory issues here in California are much stronger, much tighter than I think any other state in the union. We have certain requirements here, be it with our labor, whether the chemicals that we apply, just at every aspect of our business, we have additional regulations that, as for a young farmer, for a farmer getting in, I think that it's overwhelming, and I think it discourages a lot of young people from getting into farming. I almost, growing the crop tends to be the easier side of the business. It's all of the other issues that pile on that make farming very difficult here in California. We've been very successful. We have a national treasure here in the San Joaquin and Sacramento valleys. It's like no other environment in the world. The soils, the water, the climate, just hard to beat.
I was just wondering if you raise the minimum wage right away for everybody for $15 an hour, is it still going to be hard to get people to work? I mean, because not everybody's paying $15 an hour currently.
No, our labor force, our minimum wage is going to $15 an hour. It won't be long, just another couple of years. We're already paying no less than probably $13 an hour, and we still have difficulty attracting people. Our average wage is probably over $15 an hour easily right now.
Judith, how about you? Is that going to be an issue?
In Yolo County, we compete with Napa, and Napa, basically the wage starts at $15 an hour in Napa. We also have a lot of cannabis growers around us, so there is also another industry that is basically starts at least at $15 an hour. So for us, I think raising the wage will make us perhaps a little more competitive, but it doesn't change the fact that there aren't enough people that want to work on farms. For us, actually, we weren't, and many farmers that I spoke to weren't that concerned really about the raise of the minimum wage on their farms. What they were concerned about was the change in the overtime, which is another conversation. I think agriculture is kind of a 24/7 job, and when the harvest is in, you're working a lot of hours. And in that respect, it is a little bit different than other outside activities, construction, landscaping. I think sometimes those activities can have a shorter day. Agriculture and overtime are a little bit of a red hot issue, but for us, it's the overtime, the changes in the overtime rule that are much more impactful than the change in the minimum wage.
So I want to change the subject a little bit. I'm conscious of time. And one of the things I want to get to is something that I saw that overlapped. Judith said that one of the big three things for her is the ability of the ecosystem to sustain the production of food by functioning correctly. Don, you talked about the groundwater challenge, and that's an example of this ecosystem not functioning. When the overdraft, there was too much water being taken from the ground, and Stuart Wolf took me out to his land, and I saw what was happening to his trees from the salt in the groundwater. So that's a good example of where you two are meeting and seeing the same challenge. What I'm curious about is how do you How do you see solving those challenges? Do you see them solving them in the same way? Is your paradigm for fixing the problems the same?
Well, what I think both of us are super excited about is healthy soil. And I think over time you've seen, there's been various different agricultural revolutions. There was the plow, there was the green revolution. I hope that the next agricultural revolution has to do with a change in paradigm regarding how we treat the soil. And Don and I have both been working really hard on that. We like to see soil covered. We like to see people who have green on their soil all year round. And I think that makes farming perhaps a little more complex, but it also has amazing environmental benefits. It means that your soil, as you add organic material to your soil, you end up holding more water. As you compost your soil, you end up holding more water. As you care for your soil, many, many wonderful things happen. We've been using compost on our farm every time we plant a crop. We use either sometimes 6 and sometimes up to 10 tons of compost per acre. And once a year, every parcel of land that we farm gets cover cropped. We try as hard as we can not to have bare soil. We're also carrying on a experiment about targeted or reduced tillage in organic agricultural systems. So one of the most exciting things that we see happening in agriculture is this revolution and this frontier in science around what's happening in the soil. And I could tell you a lot of work's been going on at our farm with scientists looking at what's going on in a mature organic soil that's been cared for the way we care for our soil for 30 years. There's a lot of nutrient cycling and microbial activity and communication between the plant roots and the microbes that goes on that's miraculous. It's an evolved relationship that exists when you take care of the soil that can take care of you and create a healthier plant and thus healthier people.
So you have less, one thing is you have less pests. That was really interesting. Less disease, less pests on your property because of the way you farm and also the nature around you. Is that correct?
I think we have many, many weeds.
Right,
As an organic farm, we have plenty of weeds. We're always out there taking care of those weeds. We do seem to have, less insect pressure than I think there is on other farms, depending on what we're growing. So I just think we have done. It's our focus is to create an ecosystem on our farm that mimics a little bit the things that work and that have evolved in nature. So you need habitat for beneficial insects. You need habitat in the soil for the fungi and the bacteria and other microbes that are involved in those cycles. And you have to steward them. That has to be your fertility program. That has to be your pest control program. And you have to think about it in those ways. Your focus is on feeding the soil rather than feeding the plant.
Don, I'm wondering because when you drive over here, we drove over this morning to our meeting, and you see miles and miles of just dirt, that doesn't have any cover on it. And how is it practical for the larger scale agriculture to put cover crops on and use compost here in the Central Valley?
Well, so in the Central Valley here, water is a real limiting factor. We would love to grow a lot more cover crop. We do a small amount, but we find that the water that it takes to grow that crop eats away into really what we can afford to use in a year. So we have to be very judicious with hopefully we get some rainfall that can help with that. But when you talk about healthy soils, Judith, I couldn't agree more. When we started growing organic in '93, we used essentially manures and compost for the organic ground. We've expanded it since we started then, but we found that the soil health was so much nicer, so much better in the organic fields. We started putting compost and manures on our conventional fields. However, we have to be careful because of food safety issues. So we can only do it, at least the manures, we can only do that in crops that have a kill step, something that's going to heat and kill any problem that might be in the food. And with FSMA and the safety audits and food safety, we have to be very judicious and very careful about storing manures on farm and fields that we use it on. But we found that the benefit we received that we saw in the organic, we also see in the conventional, and it's our standard practice. We did just a major change probably about 12, 15 years ago, and changed our whole program for fertility on our crops, and we've seen the benefits, much higher quality produce that we're doing. Our yields are better as well, but and a cut back in commercial fertilizer. So we think there's a need. I mean, there is a place for it in large scale operations and small scale operations. We have really a lot in common when it comes to that.
Well, Don, how typical are you? Are your neighbors who are farming large operations, are they looking at what you're doing and saying, God, I think I'm going to try that? Or are they experimenting? Are they asking you questions?
We've been looked at as an innovator and bringing new practices on farm and different crops. And yes, we have had neighbors starting to ask us, what we were doing, what our rates were, and they're starting to rates of applications for compost and manures, and they're actually starting to follow some of the practices that we're doing. We know that farmers communicate better than anyone. I think they see something, they either go try it themselves or they'll ask you about it. I mean, I get phone calls all the time from our neighbors that are driving through, wanting to know what we're doing on certain fields. So, very prevalent.
Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, it's really clear that the environmentally friendly and climate friendly practices are not something that just fits in an organic system. It's really clear that they fit across the board for many farming systems, and that's why the Natural Resources Conservation Service has been trying to encourage these kinds of practices for so long. In terms of the food safety issue, I want to just mention that in organic agriculture, there's a real frown. It's really frowned upon to use raw manure. It's our certifier really encourages their farmers to use compost, and we get inspected just like anyone else by the food safety folks. So I do think that. You can use compost, and there are still some food safety buyers, the people that are buying the product, not actually the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act police, but the buyers that say that they're even concerned about compost. But the science really shows that compost is fine. Maybe if you want to leave 45 days between application and harvest, you can do that if you're getting some audits. But I think that there's no problem with food safety and using these practices. In fact, we really believe that the use of some animal grazing and the use of compost and so forth creates a soil environment that is going to prevent the colonization of the soil by bacteria. And so we had a pretty long-term project going on our farm looking at what happened with our sheep moving across agricultural fields and measuring the level of E. coli in the soil after cultivation, planting, and then into harvest. And what those researchers found was that our soil really suppressed the establishment of E. coli in the soil, even though there were animals moving across it.
You guys are pointing out that we do have regulations in California. And whether you're an organic farmer or whether you're a more conventional farmer, there's a lot of regulations to deal with. And our feeling is among farmers in California that I keep hearing from, Michael, is that it's a lot greater than other states. That it's a higher hurdle to be a farmer in California. Is that your perspectives?
Yeah, definitely. It's our regulations are probably much tighter than anywhere. There's certain chemicals, on the conventional side that you go across the border, they're perfectly legal and they're safe to use, but in California, they're not registered for various reasons. Either new chemistry coming in takes longer to be approved within California, and and we tend to take the harsher chemicals out of food production and out of farm production much faster. So it kind of leaves us in an area where occasionally we have pests that we don't have a solution to control. So it's a difficult place to farm sometimes.
When I like to go to these conferences where the scientists come and talk about what's emergent, and one of the things that I'm hearing a lot more is the need for diverse habitat around farms to create beneficial insect populations or bird population, or whatever it is, to help reduce the dependence upon toxic chemicals. So as we were driving through this morning on the way here to the expo, I was noticing a lot of ground, and I had this idea, like, can you imagine the state of California and the farming communities of the state deciding, okay, we are farming large operations here. Could we put in the middle of this space an organic farm that's really focused on lots of habitat development that has corollary benefits for the more conventional farms around it, like islands of diversity that would help supply what the other farmers need, who are maybe not so organic, but are moving in that direction, or are doing what they can to be as sustainable as possible, but to maximize their yields. So I mean, can you imagine a world like that? Because it would change some of the atmosphere that we saw as we passed through today.
Yeah, I can see that happening, but I can also see, like with our Healthy Soils initiative, we're incentivizing habitat. We're incentivizing hedgerow production. We're in the process of finishing up 2 miles of hedgerow pollinator habitat on our farm right now. But there's incentives. The state is looking at, CDFA is looking at incentivizing compost applications, whole orchard recycling, where when an almond orchard is past its life cycle, is taken out, that the trees are totally chipped, spread back on the field, and incorporated down to a depth of 8 inches.
Rather than burning.
The past practice had been to burn everything, right, or to take it to a biomass plant, and which those are pretty much gone now. We look at farms, we look at as being the solution to carbon sequestration. Mm-hmm. We think that farms are going to be the answer to climate change in the future. Mm-hmm. And we know we see changing climate already. Mm-hmm. We see issues with some of the crops we grow during the summer. We're planting much earlier in the spring than we ever used to because we don't have the frost. And we farm peppers all the way to the end of November. So much different than it was before.
Well, did you want to say something? I've been hearing, actually, the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, Erin Fitzgerald, we did a podcast with her a while back, and she was saying a very similar thing, that she sees the agriculture is going to be one of the major solutions that in this next century. That's one of the things that's encouraging when I see these young folks who are woofing or interning, that they are drawn to this idea, okay, we got to do whatever it takes to figure out how to get through this century. We're learning the skills. Do you think that in the conversations that you're on here at the center of California's largest agriculture, I know that Judith is in these conversations because of the culture she came from. Are you seeing more and more farmers wanting to engage and go along with what you just said about being a climate solution and what Erin's saying? Are they embracing you? Are they challenging you? Because challenging could be good. It means they're thinking about it.
It's a slow process. I think that they're seeing what's being done, and if they like what they see, they're going to repeat it. They're going to latch onto it as well. Some are much more slower than others. There's always the ones that'll innovate, that'll move forward quicker. And I think with the younger generation coming in, I think they're going to be adapting the practices a lot quicker and moving them on farm a lot faster, as with the technology that's coming today. I mean, it's turning into a different type of farming.
Yeah, I feel such a sense of urgency about some of this that I do think that what Don described is one of the main ways that you see change happen in farm country is farmer to farmer and field to field. But we really need also to have a public-private partnership. We need the public to be a partner with agriculture in encouraging these changes. We need policies that incentivize it and make it happen to a much larger degree than what we currently have.
So you think there should be a lot more resources pouring in. Well, there's a big bond initiative coming up in the state of California, which will be, Jenny Lester-Moffat, the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, was here this morning, and I saw her briefly, and we talked a bit about it. The department's asking for $200 million. I know that CalCan, Community Alliance for Family Farmers, Roots of Change, we're trying to get it to $600 million because we think there needs to be a lot more investment in agriculture. I mean, if you think about the importance of agriculture in the state to the nation and the world, we underinvest in agriculture. And so it would be really great to see a lot more money. Do you want to, Rodger, do you think we should open up questions here? We've been going for about an hour.
Draw some more in here because I think this is really, is interesting. And I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking and thinking, well, if I was a little younger, would I go into farming now or not? And when I'm looking at our friends that have already commented a little bit, I find myself wondering, can you see yourself becoming a farmer like Don someday or a farmer like Judith someday? Or is it the sort of thing that you aspire to that you don't, you stay smaller scale in your operation? Maybe, do you want to start with some reaction of what you see and maybe respond a little bit, I think, of what you've heard so far?
Sure, I'd love to respond a little bit. First of all, I think it's really heartwarming for me to see three different scales of farm. For us doing just a couple of acres on a little homestead farm of vegetables to someone that's got a going operation, our heroes for many years, the Full Belly Farm with 400 acres to someone that's farming 5,000. And I think it's so important that we find common ground and that this conversation happens because not everyone can be a small farmer. There's no exact right way to do it. There's all different levels of farming. And for us to find the common good and the common good of taking care of our Mother Earth and to see a farm of your scale, Don, I think I have big hats off to you for making that change. And I was telling these youngsters on the way down, we're like driving into the belly of the beast because of all of us, the organic righteous farming movement in Northern California is just not that big down here. So for you to be doing any kind of movement that direction is a big step. And to be here at the Tulare Farm Show is, pretty amazing to be talking about microbes and, because, all the tillage equipment here is not that friendly to microbes. So I think that one more thing I'll say before I let these guys ask a question is just, it seems to me that we really need to, as a culture, as a society, we need to value the food that we eat. All this race to the bottom of the prices of food, the stores, the cost less, the pay less, get your burger for $1. It's just not doing farmers or our earth any good because it incentivizes monocultures that are producing poor quality food cheap and a lot of it. And people like us, we rely on my wife to subsidize our farm. And according to Acres Magazine, 91% of small family farms have off-farm income to survive. It's really hard to inspire these youngsters to take on a farm when they see our farm struggling. My wife driving to Fresno every day to support our farming. There's something wrong with that picture. And, the value of vegetables, I don't think, is truly set. It's artificially low for anyone that's trying a small farm. So,
Yeah, when we talk about sustainability on farm, and our buyers tend to forget that sustainability is actually making a profit. And they have great, major food companies have major sustainability programs, and then their buyer comes and beats us up over half a cent. I mean, it's terrible.
Well, and I'm surprised that didn't come up earlier yet in our conversation because I think
it was my number one worry is economic viability.
Absolutely. And when we look at other states that don't have as high as restrictions as we have or guidelines, their standards are lower than in California. It seems like we need to draw attention to the fact that this product is from California. Right. And so, people make choices right now. They can choose to buy organic. They can choose to not buy organic, but they can also, in those cases, choose, know something about what country it came from, let alone from some states. A lot of people recognize that there's a difference in the countries, but they'd be surprised to know that there's a difference in the states, that some states have higher standards. Knowing what I know, I have some preferences. You might have another comment.
Yeah,
Want to-
you guys
the
want
rest of you have another question?
questions or
Mary,
comments
maybe?
from you guys?
Yeah, look at then to Mary.
A couple of thoughts that got brought up. So number one, I was the first hedgerow program manager for the Yolo County Resource Conservation District back in 1997. And we was working with Rachel Long and cooperative extension advisor there. And we were going out to farmers to try to get them to start hedgerows on their farms. And there was not very many people that were interested in putting hedgerows in 1996. John Anderson with Hedgerow Farms was really focusing on it. Several other farms around were doing a few. And what I take pride in today, and to the point of how slowly things can move, but also how quickly too, is how many years we are later now, the number one conservation practice that is utilized by the NRCS, the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, is hedgerows in the state of California. So while it seems slow to those of us who've been there, I take a lot of not just pride in being there in the beginning to really help move it forward, but also pride in the agricultural sector of all sizes of farms to take on hedgerows. And I think we can do that, to the point earlier about whether it's healthy soils and the common ground we have there, or it's working with young people to help them find new opportunities, whatever it may be. We in the agricultural sector, I think, have a tendency to, once we see good ideas, we definitely, as you said before, Don, we're pretty good at taking them and running with them. The other thought that I had that you brought up, Michael, was this idea about having organic farms kind of intermixed between in big conventional farms. So that one of our graduates of our program, her name is A.D. Guzman. She's now a PhD. She's from Firebaugh. She's a daughter of farm workers. And she didn't want to go into production ag, just like we've talked about, but she wanted to be in agriculture. So she's now a PhD student at UC Berkeley, focused on insectary hedgerows and insectary pollinators. And she's working on in this region and in Firebaugh, looking at the impact of some of those smaller farms that are run, whether they're Hmong farmers, whether they're Latino farmers, smaller scale farms, and the impact of that diversity and that biodiversity on the surrounding larger farms.
Wonderful to
It's
hear.
a really interesting research project that she's almost done with. And so I just think that to me, that's also the sign of what young people can really bring. She looked at her community, she looked at the people she grew up with and the other farmers that she grew up with, and she said, what kinds of things can I bring to this conversation and to the future science of agriculture in California? So just
That's a
some
beautiful,
neat things,
yeah,
right?
a beautiful slice of what's going on. That gives. I mean, I got the chills when you said that she was doing that. I mean, that is so fantastic. I really, I guess, touched by the fact that young people they think out of the box, right? We were talking a little bit about this last night. The innovators in agriculture often weren't born on farms. Right. Go ahead. You want to say something about that, Don?
No, you're right. I think we didn't have somebody telling us you have to do it this certain way, and so we had a pretty wide open palette to delve into, and I think a lot of us, just look at other ideas, other ways to bring innovation on farm, to make change, and so there's something to be said for not having to been grown.
I tell you,
raised on a farm.
it's easy.
Nothing wrong with it. I think it's fantastic, but yeah, we need. Yeah, I always embrace all farmers. I don't care if they're in San Francisco growing a small plot somewhere, or a large scale farming operation, and everything in between. Agriculture needs to be embraced at every level.
I was just getting ready to get all enthusiastic about agriculture. We start the conversation, it seems like it's a little downer. But the more you talk about it, there's a lot to get excited about. I mean, you look at these things that are taking place at all different levels, and you look at the ability to bring the soil back. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when my dad was hearing from Earl Butts and others, take out the hedgerows. And so all of them are being pulled out. Now they're being put back in again, thank goodness. The other thing I've noticed here in California, I had some people that were looking at the soils around missions that had not been touched since the late 1700s at all, and compare it to some of the farms right around them, and the soil's a lot better. You know, people say we've made soil worse. Not necessarily. Some places they've actually are making soil better, and even like say back to the time of the missions. So it is possible to make progress, and we seem to be engaging that way.
Yeah, just speaking of young folks taking on and thinking outside the box, our family is kind of an example of that, because my son really recently, in the last 3 or 4 years ago, got very inspired about no-till. And I think, speaking of environmental things and about losing our carbon to the atmosphere, all the carbon that gets oxidized through tillage practices, it's an example where I, as the papa, papa of the farm, had to kind of step back a little bit and yet let the young mind take on a little bit. So we went cold turkey no-till on our entire farm. And I love my tractor, you know, I love moving dirt around, but it's very interesting to see the changes that we're witnessing in the organic matter levels going up. And so that's just one example of how we need to be open to new ideas and the young minds and thinking outside the box. I think that's very important. And one last thing is, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a plug to EcoFarm. Being a board member of the Ecological Farming Association in Santa Cruz, if any young people that are hearing this, or, you know, want to gather around a bunch of folks that are very concerned about the health of our soil and want to network with farms of all sizes, Don's presented. I moderated a workshop he did at EcoFarm. Look it up, EcoFarm in Santa Cruz, Ecological Farming Association. I think it's a real worthy organization. There's a wonderful conference every year near the end of January, and I just got to put a plug in there, do my board duty.
Great idea. Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of I've seen over the years. It used to be kind of more a very homogeneous group of kind of back to the landers or people who kind of rejected big agriculture. I see a lot more large farms going now, people that are more conventional who are investigating. I wanted to add something about hedgerows. I'm on a board of an organization called the Wild Farm Alliance, which was started by a lot of eco-farm folks. And one of the projects that we're developing right now is this idea of trying to get to 1,000,000 miles, which is 4 times the moon, 1,000,000 miles or to the moon of back of hedgerows. Because we were looking at some data about what happened in England between the end of World War II and the present. They went to the moon and back in terms of elimination of hedgerows, and it's had a huge impact on the English countryside and the English ecosystem, the loss of those hedgerows, which were part of their diverse and healthy agriculture back in the day. And so I'm so excited to hear that you're planting 2 miles of hedgerows, because the data, I was just at UC Davis asking them, there's like I think it's only 400 miles of hedgerows in the state of California right now, and it's hardly changed. I mean, it's changed, but it hasn't changed as rapidly as you would hope, given the focus on it. But perhaps there's a big uptick now. Wouldn't that be exciting?
One other thing I want to add to this too, and we were talking about people coming back and getting involved. One thing I'm noticing and Don, you might know some of your neighbors that I'm aware of that are large-scale agriculture. Their kids have gone off and been woofers like some of you, which worldwide organization, organic farming something.
Worldwide opportunities on organic farms.
Opportunities. So these are people that grew up maybe in Fresno County, and they've gone off, got a college degree, and then they've gotten this experience, and now they're coming back to these farms, and they're bringing these ideas too. So that's why I think we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, and leaning the right direction. So
You're gonna be shy, I guess.
Yeah. I'll tell you, really, just getting out of your own environment, getting out of your own backyard, and going to see what other people do, if it's another state, if it's another country. I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to travel into a lot of the agricultural areas in the world, and every time I do, I bring back something that I've learned and implement it. I may change it, I may tweak it, but implement it on farm, and it's been really to the benefit of the farm.
I have one last question for you, Don. I'm thinking about this. As you brought up, we have the strictest regs in the country, if not the world, around agriculture. Europe has some in some places, Switzerland particularly I'm thinking of, but in Germany. But we have incredible regulations. Yet the public seems so focused on eliminating chemicals, healthy food. There's a big attack on meat, which I think is kind of crazy. But there's a lot of things that are happening. And if you imagine a conversation with someone in a grocery store that comes up to you, and I know it happens, farmers get attacked, big farmers particularly. What is your response? How do you handle those moments? What do you want them to understand about your journey, the journey of your colleagues in the field, to meet this demand that is growing?
We try to explain that we are very regulated, and what we do apply to a crop is extremely. It's totally different than the way we used to farm. Anything we do apply is very targeted, and has very. It's gone by the time it hits a food store. It's a totally new chemistry that we are using. And we want to tell them that we do care about the food ourselves. I eat the same food. I go out in the field. I eat from the field daily. And that we do care about the environment, that we care about how we produce food. And it's difficult to tell the story to someone who hasn't seen it. And the same as Judith, we have a very transparent open door policy. We host probably thousands of people a year coming on farm to show them, all the different techniques that we use on farm and how we produce safe food, both organic and conventionally. So,
what is it? I'm curious about the impact on you as a human, though. Like, do you? Is it disheartening when that happens for you, or do you? Are you challenged by it? Because this is like the crux of the matter. How do we break through the empathy for all sides on these issues? How do we get to that?
It's difficult, but I look at it as a challenge, and I take a lot of pride in what we produce. The amount. I calculated the calories several years back, and I think we feed 150,000 people 3 meals a day with what we produce on farm, and it's probably gone up since then. So we try to explain how we farm and try to communicate the best we can. I mean, I go to large forums and try to educate people. I spoke at Yale one time, was fascinating, and I being a larger farmer, I thought I was going to have a very tough time. The class stayed the full hour, and we continued on for another half hour with community members and the classroom, just understanding farming, not any one particular item, but it was just fascinating being in touch with the consumer. They were so interested in where their food came from and how it was produced. I think they want to hear our story. I really do.
I think that's the good news, is that we've been saying it a lot lately, is, talk to a farmer, and have those conversations. Know where your food is grown, know how it's grown. And I've seen it in California. We go to the Santa Monica Farmers Market, and they've got a display down there where everybody that's exhibiting there has all their farming practices, whether they're certified organic or not certified organic. And I'd say when I've talked to farmers that get challenged, nearly 100% have successful conversations. It's rare for me if they take the time to say, well, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, here's an answer to your question. And that, among, I think, almost anything else, gives you hope that we're, can be on the right track when we can be proud of looking them in the eye and saying, here's what we're doing, here's how I'm doing it, and if there's a way to do it better, I'll try.
Good. Before we close, I know because we got to close in a minute, and you're going to do that for us, Rodger, right? But do you have anything you want to close with?
I don't know if this is what I would choose to close with, but I do want to just add on a little bit to that conversation. I think if you look at the problem in communication between rural and urban, or ag and urban, where it doesn't come between the farmer and the consumer really as much. It comes because of the policy issues. It comes because of the conversation between organizations. And I think as agriculture, we're looking to have a partnership with the public around our ability to be sustainable into the future as agriculture, but also our responsibility to our communities. California is a very urban state, and agriculture has some things to be very, very proud of, but also some things to answer for. And I think that it's very nice to feel really happy about the fact that the farmer and the consumer can have an individual conversation and meet there. But you have to also look at that level above that, which is the community level, the society level, the environment, all of those things, and the way that we're asking for a partnership. We'll do our part. We'll tell our story, but we also have to meet those responsibilities to our communities and to the environment in terms of showing that we're willing to, if we're in partnership, if there is a partnership and there are incentives and there is support, we're willing as an industry to change some of the practices that have been harmful.
Yeah, I think that's well said, because it's true, there has been a lot of harm. The chemistries have changed because the chemicals were killing people and destroying the environment. The species are lost. That's true. Those are all true things. And the sad part in the past was, and you remember this, I remember it, being in fights, sitting in rooms, like you said, between organizations, fighting over the future, fighting over conversations about chemicals or biotech or whatever. The need, though, and you see it going on in the nation at the political level, it's a mess. The polarization means nothing good's happening, really. So the question is, how do we get to this realignment where people actually commit to give the farmers what they need and the farmers are willing to respond? Well, how do we do that?
It's a real difficult challenge, and I think it comes from our buyers that are sourcing our products. They need to send the message to their consumers, and they need to justify why we should be being paid a little more. It really doesn't take much to to incentivize, to give us enough a little extra money to do a lot of these special programs on farms. And I think if our story is told by the large food companies, they always seem very interested, but we just don't see the follow through to the farm.
I think you're starting to see it, though.
You are
And
beginning
I
to.
just talked to
agree.
somebody yesterday who's that they're out making sure that they can confirm what the sustainability programs of various farmers are. And they're getting to the point that they're not only following through on that end, they're starting to put it on the packaging, they're starting to do it in their advertising. And so they reach a lot more people than we can, even with the commodity checkoff programs and so forth, when they decide that they want to have certain kind of production and be totally transparent to their customers.
Right, and we're seeing the NGOs, the Environmental Defense Fund, we partnered with them on monarch habitat on farm. And I think they tell our story maybe better and more believable than we can do it ourselves.
You want them telling your story. You don't want to have to tell it.
Exactly.
Right.
We heard this morning about it's much better if somebody else is promoting you than you're promoting yourself.
Absolutely.
And we think that's a great way to go.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I think this is doing what we were hoping we could do. And we've had a really good conversation. And I think we've just scratched the surface, though. I think that we have felt that there is an opportunity to create another podcast, What the World Needs. There's millions of them already.
Right.
But a podcast that we're going to come together. We each have podcasts individually, but we're going to do this new podcast to have conversations like this, looking at our food system and how we improve. I think we're heading the right way, Michael.
Yeah, I feel like it. I really appreciated the fact that folks showed up to participate in the conversation. They added a lot, and really appreciate Judith and Dawn to take. You guys are very busy, and you took time out to do this, and we really appreciate it.
And we also want to thank the people here at the World Ag Expo. They've been very kind to let us come here and set up so we could kind of be on the grounds. And it's kind of, as you said earlier, you're going to the belly of the beast from some perspectives. But this is big agriculture from all over the world, and we're sitting in the middle of it, having a conversation. And then this particular conversation we're going to have, it's going to be residing on their website, on our websites, and we're going to be incorporating them into the new podcast too. So we want to thank you. And we want to thank also, Environmental Defense Fund, you mentioned them. And
Agricultural Council of California, both
they were
sponsors.
helping us, put this together. So everybody have to keep an eye out when we'll make some more announcements about the fact that Beyond Your Table is a new podcast. In the meantime, you can take out Flipping the Table, and you can see Farm to Table Talk, and wherever you get your podcast, and we'll post this conversation there in the meantime.
Right.
So thank you.
Thanks.
We want to thank the underwriters of this podcast. The Environmental Defense Fund is working to build climate resilience on the front lines, America's farms. With well over half of the Earth's lands managed by a farmer, a rancher, or forester, our ability to thrive on a changing planet will depend on creating incentives, policies, and social norms to build agricultural resilience. That's why EDF works with powerful and trusted partners like the National Corn Growers Association to accelerate the adoption of practices that deliver co-benefits for soil health, water quality, and wildlife. EDF has a unique approach, linking science, policy, and farm economics to deliver the maximum benefit to the environment and to farmers' bottom lines. Ultimately, the Environmental Defense Fund works on transformative solutions for agriculture that allow people and nature to prosper for generations to come.